Shout my hip hop since 1987, niggas. Hip hop since 1987.com.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. Appreciate y'all. You know, it's supposed to be a snowstorm tonight, so it's good to see everybody out here. Next, I'd like to thank you, to say it's a pleasure and an honor to be sitting here with you. And I'd like to thank Milk Boy Studios for providing the venue for us to be here, and also Heineken Green Room for providing this platform. So, it's you've accomplished so much, it's hard to know where to start.
Wait, the mic's right?
No,
just kind of disappeared.
Yeah, are you back now or no?
No, yeah.
You're there, what about you?
I believe so.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Like I said, you've accomplished so much, it's hard to know where to start. You've produced for every legendary artist of this era. For the new up-and-coming big dogs, it's a badge of honor to get a beat from a producer like yourself. No one gets to where you are without having a deep passion for their craft. So I have to ask, where does your passion come from, and also what motivates you to consistently produce at such a high level?
Interesting question. I've never really thought about what motivates me. I mean, really what it is, this is all I know. You know what I mean? I've been, like, I DJ'd my own first birthday party. Like, my mother has pictures of me running around with a Superman suit and a crazy afro with records in my hand, like putting records on the record player. You know, and that's the element that I was raised around. There were no other DJs in my family, but like my father was played jazz organ. My mother was a singer as a hobby. Neither one of them did it professionally. But you know, growing up, music, computers, technology, records, that's all I ever really knew. So, not to say I couldn't do anything else, but, you know, growing up that way and growing up around the jazz fusion that my father was playing, and growing up around the pop and the rock and the new wave that my mother was playing, and I had the blessing of having an older cousin who was kind of just becoming of age when the hip hop became prominent. And growing up around that, and my aunt who used to let me pretend I was DJing and scratch her records on the wood floor, you know, like pretending to be Red Alert, you know, or Marley Marl, and destroying her entire record collection in the process. Just growing up around that really shaped the foundation of everything that ended up becoming what it is for me now. And at this point, I think what keeps me motivated is the fact that I don't have to do it. You know, it's funny, I was actually reading this article the other day. Some featured a piece about me, I forget where it was, some website or magazine or something. And one of the things that they said was, you would assume that somebody who's accomplished what Just Blaze has done would ride off into the sunset, you know, with a bag of royalty money and call it a day. And I never really looked at it in that capacity, but I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, technically I could, but the fact that I don't have to do it anymore is what actually makes me happy to do it. There was a point, I say that to say, what I mean by that is there was a point when I was scrambling to establish my name, to establish my hustle, to make money, to make a market industry where I was just doing beats for anybody and everybody. And the end result wasn't always great. You know, it was a thing where sometimes you got paid some good money to go to the studio with somebody, but then when you got in the studio, the record was just like, but you've already been paid, you gotta do what you gotta do. And your job as a producer is to produce. It's not to make a beat, it's to produce and deliver the end result of a vision. And there were times where I don't know what that A&R's vision was because the artist was terrible. You know, or that was his homie or whatever, you know, or he was the homie of a homie. You know, so that was where more of the struggle came into play, when you're just trying to establish your name. At this point, the name was established. the bank accounts are okay. You know, I have to do this and chase a check. But that's where the more creative freedom comes into play, where you can just like sit back and say, oh yeah, I want to do this. And when you want to do it, you know, because you're excited about the project, that changes the end result greatly. You know, like, I actually, the more I decreased my workload, the better my records got. You know, like, say, when did T.I.'s Live Your Life come out? Like 2006, 2007. At that point, you know, I had been in the game, you know, 10 years. It's very rare for a rap producer to have their biggest records that far in. Normally, you come in, you do your thing, 2 or 3 years later, you're out. Yeah. And there's a new dude out, and then there's another dude out, you know, and the cycle continues. I started writing and producing the biggest records of my career when it should have been over by today's standards. And I think that was because I just had the creative freedom to just sit back and not really worry about it and let the music come to me, you know, or let the ideas come to me as opposed to trying to chase and find ideas. You know, Live Your Life, that was initially a joke. I don't know if you guys might remember, there was a video that went viral in the early YouTube days of a fat kid. It was called, if you Google fat kid singing, you get this video of this kid singing the Maya he, Maya huh, and he's like, poor kid, he's like probably 14 and like 300 pounds. He's the OG Terrio. Yeah. And it was one of the first videos to go viral in that era, and I'm like, I should make something out of this just to be funny. And then I made it, and then I'm like, wait a minute, this could actually be more than a joke. And then it just so happened the next night, T.I. calls me like, yo, you got something for me? I'm coming to New York tomorrow. And I'm like, actually, I do. Wrote the hook, the concept, you know, and the framework for it all. He came through and did it. And it was like, but that was because I had the freedom to not just be like chasing down ideas. You know, or even like Lord knows, like I was just messing around, passing the time, came up with this idea. And one of my homies works with the Harlem Boys and Girls Choir alumni choir. And I'm like, yo, tell them to come down, I got an idea. You know, so it's different when you're just trying things out at your leisure as opposed to, gotta get this money, gotta get this money, gotta get this, gotta get that. Like, so I think for me, I take a bit, not pride, but I take a bit of there's a bit of comfort in knowing that you can just be creatively naturally. And I think that my art has actually been better because of that.
Okay. Now, you touched on something. I want to take it a little bit back, and then we're going to move through the journey. As a child, I heard, you know, programming, like you said, was one of your first interests. You were very tech-savvy, a hacker of sorts. Maybe give us a little background on how you got into the programming.
Well, I guess it's a twofold thing. Well, it's actually more than that, but from the jump, my father was a computer programmer. He worked for Pfizer in IT. So, even before I knew what it was, I was in computer labs, and before you had flash drives or even floppy disks, you had these giant tapes that held the data, and I would just be in his room, like in his office or in his lab, like, what the hell is this? You know, but I was just fascinated by it. So, and around that time is when computers first started to be introduced into schools, you know, on a widespread basis. So we had some PCs at school, and I was just naturally had an inclination for being able to get around them. And then shortly after that, my parents bought us me, my brother, my sister, our first home computer. And I remember that my father had some books in his man cave, some computer programming books. So I just grabbed one and just started figuring out, okay, well, let's see what we can do. And I was actually fascinated by the colors of the cover of these books, more so than anything else. I didn't even know they were computer programming books. I just remember seeing the colors and the bright oranges and the blues and whatever, and being like, hey, what is this? And I'm like, oh, this is how to make computer programs. I'm like 4 years old. But when we got the computer, I remembered, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. there's books for these kind of things upstairs. Snuck into my father's, man cave den, whatever you want to call it. Got the books, and at like 6 years old, wrote my first computer program. And very simple, very rudimentary. It was just a thing that basically said, the computer would ask you, what's your name? And you type in Justin, and it would say, hi, Justin. Very simple stuff, but my father seeing that, or my parents seeing that, like at 5 years old, how'd you do that? And I'm like, I don't know, it was in the book. So I just figured out how to do it on here. And around the same time, you had like the Atari, the Nintendo, the Sega, so my things I wanted to make video games. So I taught myself how to make, basic video games. So that's where a lot of the love of my little technology started. From there, I was just always a tinkerer. I would take apart cordless phones. My father had a work pager, the beeper where it didn't even show you the number. It was just when you knew when it beeped to call the office. Took that apart, got in trouble. I was just trying to figure out how it worked. Yeah. And then moving forward over these, my father, like I said, he was also a keyboard player. So, always like, aside from his organ, you had Casio keyboards laying around the house and Yamaha keyboards, and just learning the ins and outs of those and how those worked, taking them apart. And then I want to say the convergence of the two probably happened back when Soul to Soul came out with Back to Life. In that video, there's a performance shot of, I believe it's Nelly Hooper, who was the producer. There's a performance shot of them performing outside, and he's playing a keyboard, but you can see there's a Mac attached to the keyboard. It was like a Macintosh 2 SE or something, but seeing that, I'm like, wait, he's making music with a computer. And that's when the two worlds started to really collide. Because I grew up around my father playing, so I knew how to play a little bit. I knew how to DJ a little bit. I understood like the kind of, I'm skipping over a lot, but both of those worlds were happening for me. And then at one point, when I saw that shot in that video, that's when they collided. Like, wait a minute, I can use a computer to make music. And begged my mother to take me to the mall. There used to be a software chain called Software Etc. And back in the 80s, and I walked in there, and I'm like, hey, I need this program that lets you make music on your computer. The guy's looking at me like, what? So I'm like, all right, forget you. So I walked around a computer store, and I found this thing that said MIDI Workshop, and it had music notes on the box. So I'm like, this has to be what he was using. Totally wasn't, but in my 10-year-old mind, it was. It was like $50, which at that time. And at that age was a lot of money, so I'm like, Mommy, please, like, I need this. And she's just like, here we go again. Because she'd already bought me a mixer for Christmas a couple months before that. So she buys it, and that was really my introduction to making music on a computer. And, you could say it was all uphill or downhill from there. But, yeah, I've always been a tinkerer, always been very much a gadget person into electronics and things like that. And making things do what they weren't supposed to do.
Now, you used to make melodies for a device that's somewhat obsolete, staying on that topic, two-way pagers.
Right.
Now, with the process you're explaining, how did you even figure out that you could make melodies for a two-way pager?
I wish I knew. For those of you who don't know, before you had iPhones, before you had Android, before you had before you even had like a Nokia 6220, there were these devices called the Motorola Skytel was the provider. That wasn't the name of the device. The Time Port was the second version. It was the page writer. The page writer, and you could send emails from one device to another, and it was like the coolest thing in the world. So there was an app in there that lets you design your own ringtones. Very rudimentary. It wasn't MIDI based. It wasn't computer based. It was actually all math. You had to enter numbers in certain sequences and get them to equate to musical notes. And I figured out a way to make those into ringtones of rap records. And it's funny, I actually was more popular for that than I was for making beats at that time. Because what I would do is I would make them, send them out, and to like the 5 people that I knew. Like, it was like, yeah, like Clue, Jay, Duro, Bleak maybe, like a few people that I knew who had them. And then it would just spread out and kind of, you know, what we would call these days go viral. And people would hear my name, or people would meet me and be like, "You're the guy that makes the beats on the 2-way." You know, it wasn't like, "Oh, you're the guy who just did the beat for such and such record." It was, "You make my 2-way, my ringtones." And it's funny because I remember a bunch of people saying like, "Yo, you should find a way to trademark this or make this into a business, whatever." And I'm like, whatever. Meanwhile, nowadays, ringtones make hundreds of millions of dollars, you know, so I missed that train.
Missed that wave.
But yeah, I missed that wave for sure. But yeah, that was it was kind of ill because I figured out ways to not only make tones, but I was able to simulate things like reverb and kicks and snares and delays and things like that. And it was really all math, which is funny because I suck at math. Like, you know, it took me so long to learn my times tables. But I'm very strong at logic, in the literal sense. So for me, it wasn't so much trying to do the math of the numbers. It was figuring out the logic. Like, okay, logic says if this number makes this note play for this long, if I change the number, the note should be shorter. Now I just have to figure out how to make it play really short so it's a hi-hat. You know, so that's really all that was. But again, just being the tinkerer, you know, weirdo tech dude that I was, just gave the music industry the ringtones for a couple of years.
Now I have to ask, fast forward to now, like you said, ringtones and just the IT being taught in schools at a whole nother level. How important do you feel it is for programming to be taught in our schools? Because you have celebrities like a Chris Bosh who spoke out and said he feels like programming language should be taught just as much as the English language.
It's funny, I actually saw something about that recently. I think there's a push for that. I don't know if it's in the UK, somewhere. Right now, they're trying to get programming languages legitimized as, you know, the same way we would teach
writing and reading.
Right, writing and reading or communicative language. You know, if you can teach French, why can't you teach C++ or whatever? Very strong suit, and I think, you know, what I feel like is a lot of times, or actually I shouldn't say that. I feel like in today's society, in our education system, there are still a lot of outdated practices happening. We're still teaching kids the same way they were taught in the 50s, which is, here's your test, here's your homework, study this, come back, regurgitate it. It's all about memorization. Like, with the exception of a few principal things, I can't tell you 90% of what I've learned in high school, because I didn't learn it, I just memorized it and regurgitated it on a test and then forgot it the next day. So is that really teaching somebody, or is that just forcing them to memorize what they read in a textbook or a chalkboard? What I really learned throughout high school, later high school, and through college was the art of dealing with people. You know, that's what I got mostly out of college. That's what I got, is the art of dealing with people, understanding the human psyche, understanding how to exist in a society as an adult. And that's something they actually don't teach in schools. And maybe that's something you can't teach. That might be something that, you know, you just have to learn going through life. But I'm all for a programming language being, or programming languages being taught. You know, it's one, you can take Spanish or you can take, you know, Flash. You know, it's they address different parts of our livelihoods, but at the same time, because we have these outdated forms of education and these outdated ideas of what success is, you still have those parents who say, you know, you need to do this, and you're gonna be a doctor, or you're gonna be a lawyer, or not even that, just you're gonna go to school, you're gonna graduate, you're gonna get a job, you're gonna get your 401k, and you're gonna work in in a factory, and then you're gonna get a gold watch after you work there for 50 years, and then you die. You know, and so I think that speaks to more of our societal norms on a whole. Like, I was very, very grateful. You know, I mentioned, you know, my mother and my family quite a few times, just doing this conversation. But the reason I do that is because they were always like really supportive. Like, yo, that Sharon, he has some kind of a gift. He has some weird shit. So you might want to support that. You know, like, and at first it was, you know, learn your algebra, learn your this, you know, your calculus, or learn your, you know, your times tables or whatever. But then eventually it was like, okay, I'll take you record shopping. Okay, I'll buy this keyboard. Okay, I'll buy this mixer. And they nurtured it. And I think above anything else, that was the biggest reason for the biggest thing behind my success is that I had a family structure and a family unit that didn't understand it, but they knew that there was something there. And, you know, it took, like, sometimes my older cousin, who's like my mother's little brother, you know how black people are, our family structures are all over the place. But he was like, yo, Sharon, buy him that turntable. You know, like, which had such an impact, you know, on me years later. Because I realized that I had other friends who had those same talents, whose parents weren't supportive because they wanted to go get a job. And they went and got those jobs. Don't get me wrong, some of those guys are living great lives. But they didn't really get to accomplish what God really, you know, they didn't enjoy the fruits of the labor of what God really blessed them with.
Shout my hip hop since 1987, niggas. Hip hop since 1987.com.